Welcome to another edition of ATL Prime Sports. I'm JJ Jurjevich. Joining me this evening is the one, the only Wayne Ridenauer in Memphis, Tennessee. You can find ATL Prime Sports on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at ATL Prime Sports. And you can search ATL Prime Sports on Apple and Spotify as well. Our personals at JJ Get You One for myself, at RWY Jr. for Wayne, and at Corder Todd, Cordertodd for Todd Corder, who is on vacation this evening again. And Wayne, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited about football. I think it's because Texas still keeps doing their flip-flop stuff on baseball. Win a few, lose a few, win a few, lose a few. It's starting to get irritating.
I'm doing fairly well myself. I'm loving that former UFC champion Conor McGregor was cast into the remake of the 1980s hit Roadhouse. Interesting to see how this one goes. He will play an original role. Jake Gyllenhaal is the star in the movie. It's expected to be on Amazon in the next year or so, I assume. And also, we will take a moment of silence and remembrance of Vin Scully and Bill Russell, who left this world in the last week, the last couple days of each other. We'll talk about that with our guest, Dave Cohen. Major League Baseball's trade deadline, and was last year a rebuilding year for Nick Saban? Question mark. That's what's on tap for today. And without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guest, friend of the show. We welcome back Dave Cohen, voice of the Georgia State Panthers. Dave, good to have you back on. How you doing this evening?
I'm good, guys. How you doing? Good to be back with you. It's been a while.
It has been. It's been too long. A little off season there, and we got into the college baseball, and here we are now, ramping up for college football season, ready to have you back on. So that brings me to my first question. We'll get to the college football in a second, but with Vin Scully passing, he's called some of the greatest moments in baseball history, Dave. Aaron's 715, Kirk Gibson's World Series home run in 88, Don Larson's perfect game in the World Series in 56. Your comment on Vin Scully's passing, and give us one of your favorite moments with Vin Scully on the call.
Well, it's not a favorite moment, but it's the 1986 World Series, Boston Red Sox, New York Mets. Bounding ground ball to first, gets by Buckner. And that was what I think Ray Knight came in to score to tie it, if I remember correctly. So I can still hear that in my head, and the ball gets by Buckner. Whatever the final call was there. People think that won the World Series for the Mets. It didn't. That was just Game 6. It went to a Game 7. A Game 7 that the Red Sox had a 3-0 lead in, by the way, and could not hold on to. But I'm trying to remember back in the early days of my radio career, covering all those Braves games back in the mid 80s, late 80s at old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. I don't have a picture of myself with Mr. Scully, but I know I, in passing, at least said hello and probably introduced myself, because even back then he was an icon, radio voice of the Dodgers with everything that he had done. It's interesting that he was with one team his entire career, starting out in Brooklyn, when you think about it, and how rare that is these days to find players, never mind broadcasters, who spend their entire career not necessarily in the same city, because he moved with them from Brooklyn to Los Angeles, but to stay with the same franchise your entire career. And, I know we say this about other people, athletes, stars, broadcasters that pass. We'll never have or never see another one like him. I think that Vin Scully definitely falls under that category. There'll never be someone again who spends upwards of 60 years as a broadcaster with one franchise.
Yeah, it's very impressive, his career, and going back, me being a young guy and realizing he was with Brooklyn. He goes out west with the team. He calls 56, the 88 series, Hank Aaron's 715. You're just like, wow, this guy was around for a lot of baseball moments. Pretty cool. prayers and thoughts go out to Vin Scully and family.
Well,
We'll talk about. Go ahead.
let me say this too, because this is a lost art in sports broadcasting. Not only was Vin Scully a sports broadcaster, a play-by-play guy, but if you've listened, even going back on YouTube to any of his, not even the most memorable broadcasts, but any broadcast, he was a storyteller. You know, his experience in his years allowed him to convey to the viewer or the listener things that he'd seen since he was in his early 20s when he joined the Brooklyn Dodgers. The players that he got to know, the players that he got, whose careers he got to call, whether it's a Jackie Robinson all the way through a Fernando Valenzuela, all the way through a Kirk Gibson, you know, all the way through the modern day Los Angeles Dodgers up until his last broadcast. But he was a storyteller, and you don't find that in sports broadcasting as much. I even admit, you know, this will be my 40th year at Georgia State, and I can story tell a little bit because of what I've seen over the span of 40 years, more specifically basketball, and I guess 13 years with football at Georgia State. But nobody will ever have the kind of career that he had over a span of 60 years, and the experiences and the peoples whose paths he crossed. In today's world of media, I don't see that happening again.
I agree with you. I don't think it will with contracts the way they are. And just you mentioned it, things being said, moving on from team to team. So you're a Boston guy, Boston sports fan, Dave. What did Bill Russell mean to the NBA and yourself? Another somber note here as we lose another great sports icon.
Yeah, well, you know, here's another thing that I put under the category will probably never happen again in the history of sports. Everybody marvels at Michael Jordan, and I do too. He was a great player. Again, covered Hawks games when he would come in as a Chicago Bull. My one regret, my first year, the very, very, very first year I arrived at Georgia State, I was a part of the broadcast crew, but I did not travel to every single game. The guy who was doing play-by-play before me, Brent, did that. Georgia State played North Carolina at Carmichael Auditorium, and Jordan played in that game. And it still bothers me to this day in a fun kind of way that I didn't get to make that trip to see Jordan play against Georgia State. Point being, Jordan won 6 titles. He won 1 collegiate national championship with North Carolina, the famous shot against Georgetown at the Superdome in New Orleans that basically won it for the Tar Heels, and gave Dean Smith his first national championship. And how many gold medals did he win? I know he won, obviously, the Dream Team with Bird, Magic, and that loaded, and Barkley, and that loaded first team. That was a gold medal. How many did he win? 2 or 3?
I think 2 or 3, yeah.
All right, think about it. Bill Russell, albeit in the earlier days of the NBA and college basketball, while playing at San Francisco for the Dons, wins 2 NCAA championships in college, 11 NBA titles in what was the NBA for that day, and even won a gold medal in the Olympics. I don't know that anyone will have a career that spans long enough in modern sports today, what it is, and being what it is, that they'll be able to replicate anything like that he did. Look at Jordan, the greatest modern player in our era. He won 6, which is great, but it's still 5 less than Bill Russell. But Bill Russell was so much more than just a basketball player. If you've seen any of the tributes across media outlets, whether it's TV or if you've listened on the radio, he was a head coach, first black head coach. Was involved with, was right there with Muhammad Ali and with
Martin Luther King.
Martin, yes, very much.
In the civil rights movement. Yeah.
A big part of the civil rights movement that he really does not get a lot of modern day credit for. Like some of the other figures, like a Jackie Robinson, like a Muhammad Ali. Again, iconic figures to the nth degree. Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, they're beyond what we know as famous. Those are iconic, historical figures above and beyond sports. Bill Russell was right there with him through a lot of that, but for whatever reason is not normally recognized as having played that role to the level that those guys did. And Russell played in Boston during an era where race relations were not what I'll term fantastic, to use a crazy word for that kind of a situation. Russell played in Boston when it was tough for an African-American athlete, as great as he was. Big loss. It's great that the fans of his generation were able to see him. It's great that those of us of the following generations have hopefully gotten to see video and gotten to hear from him and gotten to recognize what a great career he had on and off the court and what a great athlete he was. But it's, a huge loss for the world of sports for players of that era. I don't know that we'll see a player like that come along again in the future of sports with those, to put up those kind of numbers.
Yeah, well, thank goodness we have the availability these days to look at a historical record on video via the internet of all of these achievements. Hear Vince Gully call these games, some of the accomplishments of Bill Russell. So, like when you and I were growing up, best we could do was maybe a magazine article that had some pictures in it, or if some network wanted to re-show a game from the days of yore or something. But, looking forward to the upcoming football season. I know you just had media days. You've got any news from that? And Memphis starts off their season at Mississippi State. We have to go down to Starkville. Are there any away games that you're looking forward to for Georgia State?
Well, we're going to find out right out of the gate where we are as a football program, coming off what was the best season win total wise for Georgia State football. This will be our 13th season. Remember last year when we were doing these podcast interviews, at one point we were 1-4.
Yeah.
I was a little worried, to say the least. And to Georgia State's credit, I've said this and I know it's kind of a cliche, but they do really take on the personality of their head coach, Sean Elliott, who I think has been a fantastic hire for Georgia State. But coming off an 8-win season, after starting out 1-4, to finish 8-5, and to win a bowl game for the third consecutive year they've been in a bowl game. Remember, this is a program that was only 12 years old.
Yeah.
And wasn't even FBS level that entire 12 years. But we open up September 3rd on a Saturday night, Williams-Brice Stadium, Columbia, South Carolina, against the Gamecocks, which for Sean Elliott, if you're familiar with his career, where was he before Georgia State? Well, he was assistant coach on the staff at South Carolina under Steve Spurrier. And when Spurrier decides mid-season that he's had enough and for whatever reason wants to step away, who did South Carolina choose to be their interim head coach for the final 6 games of the regular season?
Coach Elliott.
None other than Sean Elliott. So he's going to be able to go back into, and he's from the state of South Carolina and has relatives, as he told me while we were in New Orleans, who have graduated from the University of South Carolina. Coach Elliott did not. He's an Appalachian State grad, exactly. So, yes, he's excited about being able to take what should be and what is a pretty good Georgia State football team back into the stadium that he worked in prior to coming to Georgia State, and hopefully give South Carolina the kind of football game that Georgia State gave Tennessee and Knoxville in 2019. Because who do we have week 2? We're back at Center Park Credit Union Stadium. First time a Power 5 program will visit Atlanta and Georgia State in the Tar Heels of North Carolina. So we're going to find out pretty quickly in the first 2 weeks where we stand, Georgia State football, where Georgia State stands from a preparedness standpoint heading into this 2022-2023 season.
Yeah.
You're
Well, I'll
listening
tell
to
you this.
Dave Cohen. Oh, go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say that South Carolina is one of my dark horse teams in the SEC as a whole, but especially for the SEC East. And I think that's one of the teams Georgia needs to look out for.
I think you might be right, Wayne. You're listening to Dave Cohen right here on ATL Prime Sports. You can find Dave on Twitter at GA State Voice. Dave, my final question's a two-parter. We mentioned part of it right there. The opening day storyline for the conference has to be how many Power Five teams you guys are facing. I count 6, including that trip to Columbia. Give us a preview of the Sun Belt Conference in general, and you already nailed a little bit of the head I'm about to say. Give us a little bit more preview in depth of Georgia State this fall and what to expect. Following up one of, if not the best season statistically for the Panthers.
Well, let me say it was a fantastic media day. I was happy to be in New Orleans. You know, it's a 14-team league now. It might be the best five league in the conference. Right. And they listen, they even intimated that there's a possibility that there could be a 15th team somewhere down the line, but they weren't ready obviously to release anything. But media day was so big this year that we arrived in New Orleans on a Monday, the 26th of July, or the 25th, and the 26th was the Sun Belt East, and the 27th was the Sun Belt West. Now, I know the SEC media days are 4 days in Atlanta at the College Football Hall of Fame, so we're half that. We're a Tuesday and a Wednesday, Sun Belt East, Sun Belt West. But I thought it was a fantastic Sun Belt Conference football media day. They did a fantastic job at the Sheraton Hotel in downtown New Orleans. Look, the Sun Belt East is loaded. I don't want to say, it's always tough to look at it in the preseason and pick winners. But when you look at the Sun Belt East with Appalachian State, with Coastal Carolina, with Georgia State, with Marshall being one of the 4 new teams coming in the league, 3 of them coming into the East in James Madison, which was in the semifinals of the FCS playoffs a year ago, and the Monarchs of Old Dominion joining Georgia State and Georgia Southern. The Sun Belt East is a beast, and it's going to be a real tough road to hoe, not just for Georgia State, but for everybody, because there's not really an easy game on that schedule, if you want to use the word easy in quotations. Sun Belt West, Billy Napier left Louisiana for the Florida Gators. They've got a new head coach. They lost a number of players to the transfer portal, as did a number of teams, number of players coming in from the transfer portal. But I would still say that right now, looking at just what everybody did a year ago, that Louisiana Lafayette would be the favorite in the Sun Belt West. Arkansas State, South Alabama is improving. Troy is improving, middle to the top of the standings there. Louisiana, Monroe, who knows? We'll see them late in the season. But we already know Appalachian State is a strong football team. Coastal Carolina won 11 games last year. We beat them in Conway. We know Marshall is a good program year in and year out. They won 7 games last year in Conference USA. We're coming off an 8-win season. So the Sun Belt East is going to be a little tougher, I think, to predict. I think Louisiana Lafayette in the Sun Belt West. So I'm just looking forward to the opening game. We start practice on Friday, and we'll have, just under 30 practice sessions to get ready before they board the buses to head over to Columbia for the September 3rd showdown with the South Carolina Gamecocks. And let me just make a final comment. There is absolutely no need for a sequel to Roadhouse.
I agree with you. That's why I thought it was kind of funny. That's why I let off with it on the show. Absolutely hysterical. You do not need to remake a classic like that. I will let you go with this comment, or question really. With all the conference realignment, when it settles down, how's this going to affect Georgia State and the Sun Belt Conference? Do you still see the the FC or FBS operating as a whole, or do you see the Power Five breaking away from the FBS? How does this work, you think, now?
I don't know if at the end of the day, the top 40 or the top 50 Power 5 programs are ready to break away from the NCAA overall? Can they take just their football programs and leave and keep all of their other sports under the NCAA umbrella? I don't know. That's the $64,000 question. I think the chase for money that's being waved around by national television has really jaded a lot of programs. Is it really necessary for UCLA and USC to have all of their teams other than football flying back and forth across the country for games in Piscataway, New Jersey against Rutgers and College Park, Maryland against the Maryland Terrapins? Women's basketball, men's basketball, baseball, softball, tennis, name a sport. Is it really necessary? What about the student athlete? Everybody, not everybody, a lot of programs talk out of both sides of their mouth. We're here for the betterment of the student athlete and the student athlete this and the student athlete that. No, they're not. Everybody's standing with their hands out waiting for television money. That's what they're waiting for.
Yep. It's, I find it the same way. I think the general public and all these TV deals don't realize how valuable the lower end of the FBS is to make up those bowl games. There's still interest in it. There's still fans. There's still a Sun Belt Media Days that has a lot of hype around it from the teams that are playing and the student athletes that are involved with these teams. So I think there's still going to be an FBS level with the Power 5 included. I just think you'll see the Power 5 expand to God knows how big. But I think the Sun Belt will survive. I think you're right about that, Dave. Dave, we're out of time. Tell our listeners how they can catch the Panther Insider podcast, and tell our listeners how they can catch you again on Twitter.
All right. Let me make one final comment with regards to that breakaway, and you guys can talk about this. Where it would really affect the Sun Belt, the other G5 conferences, and FCS, non-conference games. If the Power 5, however many, 40 or 50 of them break away, and they stop playing, and they only play each other, well, what happens to all those guarantee games? The TV money would no longer filter down to the G5 and would no longer filter down to those FCS programs that play Power 5 programs. So I'll just leave it at that. That's another $64,000 question, because a lot of those schools really bank, for lack of a better term, on that money to prop up their budgets athletically year in and year out.
You nailed. That's what I was saying with the bottom of the FBS, and I hate to group it like that in terms of Georgia versus Georgia State here. The bottom of the FBS
what it is.
Still makes up enough money to hold water and fight for their own. So you nailed it on the head. Go ahead and finish, Dave. I'm sorry.
Nope. The latest Panther Insider podcast came out today, as a matter of fact. It features Blake Carroll, our inside linebacker, and Malik Sumter, our starting center, both all preseason Sun Belt Conference. You can find that if you follow me on Twitter at GA State Voice. It's also available online at georgiastatesports.com. And again, Georgia State will open practice on Friday and then open up the college football season, their 13th season, September 3rd against South Carolina.
Yeah, and you can also get on that mailing list too for the podcast. That's how I keep up with it.
Okay, so you're the one.
Oh, yeah, right.
You're the one on the mailing list, Wayne.
Right. Well,
I appreciate it.
Well, I get it in my Gmail, so the same way as I get the show for ATL Prime Sports. So.
Well, Dave, we always appreciate your time. Go Panthers, and we'll talk at you soon.
All right, appreciate it. Always good to be on with you guys. Have a good night.
All right.
You as well. That's Dave Cohen, voice of the Georgia State Panthers, football, baseball, men's basketball. Let's move on with the show. Major League Baseball trade deadline was August 2nd. It came and it went, and it was fast and it was furious. Let's talk about some of the blockbuster deals around the league. Wayne, what deal stood out to you the most? I'll ask you first, man.
Well, I'm so jaded at my team, the Rangers, that I didn't even really look at too much of that. I know that they did some pitcher swapping, and as poor as the overall ERA of the Texas pitching is, I don't know that they could do much worse.
Yeah, there's a lot of movement, a lot more movement with the expanded playoffs. A lot of teams think they can still get that final wild card spot. I tell you, one of the biggest trades of the day, we all know Juan Soto, Josh Bell go from the Nationals to the Padres in exchange for several players. We'll get that one momentarily. I think another one in the division, the Mets get Daniel Vogelbach from the Pirates. The NL East leading Mets added much needed DH help. They deal with the Pirates. The Yankees acquire all-star Andrew Benintendi from the Royals. Much needed outfield help there. Mets also acquired Nanquin from the Reds. Mariners are going after a postseason berth, one of the longest postseason droughts in history. They're going to try it. They got Reds ace Luis Castillo, who Todd and I thought might go to the Atlanta Braves. So those are some big ones. The Dodgers get a little relief help from the Cubs with former Brave Chris Martin. Let's see. What are some other ones? We'll go back. We'll talk about the big one, the Soto trade. That's the one that really made the difference. Soto now in the Padres lineup with Tatis, all this other power. Will that get them past the Dodgers? That's the big question. I still don't think it will. I think the Dodgers are still better from top to bottom. I think they'll still win the West. Wayne, any final thoughts on MLB trade deadline? The Phillies also made a big move late and got Noah Syndergaard from the Angels, who are complete sellers. Braves even got some of that. We'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, well, Soto going to Padres, I think that's a nice, bright thing for San Diego because they really haven't had much good things happen down there. So good on them for getting that trade done.
Yeah, it almost went down with Eric Hosmer going to the Nationals. He vetoed that trade. The Dodgers take a chance on Joey Gallo, who was struggling with the Yankees. This was a puzzling move, but sometimes a change of scenery is all a player needs. And again, the big one, Padres make Juan Soto blockbuster. Superstar outfielder Juan Soto, first baseman Josh Bell. Again, I mentioned it. Nationals, they acquire left-handed pitcher Mackenzie Gore, outfielder Robert Hassel III, shortstop C.J. Abrams, James Wood, Jarlin Suna, Luke Voigt, heading back to Washington. Handful of players. If I missed one, I was reading it quickly. But man, what a blockbuster trade they made. I just don't know if the Padres. I can't put them over the Dodgers yet. Even with the lineup they have right now, I just can't put them past the Dodgers. Just can't do it. If Tatis comes back and he's 100%, maybe they can catch him. But we'll go over. Look, the lineup is great. The pitching staff is great. Musgrove, Darvish, Mania, Snell, Clevinger when he comes back. So now look at this lineup. You're going to have Bell, Croningsworth, Machado, Kim, Grisham, Soto, Will Myers, Drury they added from the Reds as well. So plenty of power. Again, the question is, will they catch up to the Dodgers, who have owned that division for several years?
That's what they're planning on doing. I can tell you that's the plan.
That's the plan. That's how they spent. But sometimes the most active team isn't always the best team at the deadline. Sometimes, just stay and add in the player or two that you need, kind of like the Braves did, which I'll transition to the Braves now from the fast and ferocious MLB trade deadline. Look, the Braves acquired what they needed to. I got a reliever in Iglesias from Anaheim, Los Angeles Angels, if you want to call them that, for Chavez and pitching prospect Tucker Davidson. They acquired right-handed starter Jake Odorizzi. Excuse me. Stutter
Yeah.
today, Junior.
I couldn't even read that name correctly. I don't think in my head.
It's Odorizzi. I just
Okay.
stuttered like Billy Madison. Tut 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 today, Junior. And that was straight up for Will Smith. Grossman from the Tigers for left-handed pitching prospect Chris Anglin. Ever since Duvall's injury, they're going to need another outfielder in that rotation. He'll platoon with Eddie Rosario, who had a great night Tuesday in a 13-1 win for the Braves. Adrian Anza's back. Big-time player in the postseason run last year. Erie was acquired from Washington for outfielder Trey Harris. But I think the biggest move is going to be Ozzie Albies. When he can come back and be healthy, that's better than any trade you could possibly have. Switch hitting, left, right, tough matchup, great defense. When he comes back in late August, early September, that's going to be a big push for the lineup. Kirby Yates coming back too in that lineup. What's really going to be tough is who goes down. Dylan Lee, A.J. Minter are the only ones with options left in that bullpen. So you'd think it'd be Dylan Lee because A.J. Minter was part of that night shift last year that was so effective in the postseason. It's going to be interesting. Iglesias is going to fit right in.
Well, you were talking about that the guy who'd switch hits left and right, and I don't know who it was, but there was a guy from the Far East that was switching sides every pitch. I don't remember. I think I saw it, and I was like, if I were that pitcher, I think I'd try to nail that dude as he was trying to switch sides.
I said that has to be annoying as a pitcher. Just choose a side and move on with it. But yeah, no, Braves did just enough. Alex Anthopoulos is never going to sit on his hands during a trade deadline, and I think he made the right moves for his ball club. Didn't get the outfielder a lot of people were rumored to talk about is Jock Peterson coming back. Sorry, listeners, I can't talk today. I don't know what it is. But yes, I think Albie's coming back, Yates coming back, getting healthy. Those two players will be better than any trade that could have been made at the deadline, which was a blockbuster deadline, by the way. Everybody who you thought was going somewhere pretty much went somewhere except for Ohtani. And that wraps up our trade deadline talk. Any final comments on trade deadline, Wayne, or the Braves?
No.
Let's move on. Interesting comments coming out of Tuscaloosa from head coach Nick Saban. Well, stop me if you've heard that before. Despite winning the SEC and playing UGA for the College Football Playoff National Championship, Nick Saban said last year was a rebuild. Let's talk about what he means by this. He meant the year was a rebuild because he lost a lot in the NFL draft. When you lose players the year before, like Mac Jones, a first-round quarterback, and then you lose Devontae Smith, the Heisman winner, I think you can consider it a rebuilding year. But let's be honest, let's flip the coin here. When you replace a first-round quarterback with the Heisman Trophy winner in Bryce Young, who happens to be my pick to win it again, then you get an Ohio State transfer in Jamison Williams, who comes in and scores 15 touchdowns for you. I wouldn't call it a rebuild, and I wouldn't put that word in any sentence if you're Alabama. It's called reloading.
Yeah.
It just calls it rebuilding. So I think that's kind of what he meant. I would take these comments with a grain of salt because it is Nick Saban, and I feel like he does this stuff to stir his team up and also
to get us
talking.
To get us talking, yeah.
Yeah, and get us talking. And guess what, folks? It worked. But look, this is a rebuild in Nick Saban's standard. If he doesn't win the championship, it was a crap season. So, but look, this year Bama's going to be just fine. I think they got arguably the two best players on both sides of the ball. I told you, I think Bryce Young is going to be the second ever back-to-back Heisman Trophy winning player other than Archie Griffin. And I think the secondary player is going to be Will Anderson Jr., linebacker. Unbelievable player, probably the number one overall pick in next year's NFL draft. So Bama will be just fine, folks. Wayne, your thoughts on Nick Saban's rebuild?
Yeah, it's definitely not a rebuild. If you want to see a rebuild, watch LSU in Florida this year. That's a rebuild. I mean, what they're doing down in Tuscaloosa right now is, like you said, they're just reloading.
Folks, if you like the content, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, a subscribe. We are on Apple, Spotify. Leave us a review. Whatever you do, just subscribe. Hit that like button. Follow us. But again, only if you like the content. All right, guys, we'll move on to our final topic of the evening. The NFL is appealing quarterback Deshaun Watson's 6-game suspension. What are your thoughts? Wayne, I'll tee this one off, man. This was a somber day for the NFL, in my opinion. Look, I was just looking it up. Ben Roethlisberger, when in 2010, got 4 games in a 16-game season. They now play 17. I think 6 games is not enough, especially when the New York Times pointed out that there were 66 different women therapists, massage therapists in 17 months while he was a Texan. And that's, again, per the New York Times. 30 women accusers. Why would you need that many women to service your massage therapy needs? Why don't you just have a speed dial of maybe 5 or 6 that 3 or 4 of them can't fit you in, maybe the next 2 can? That's what puzzles me here. And again, Ben Roethlisberger got 4 games. This seems like a slap on the wrist and it was for 1 woman. Again, this is 30 women. He settled out of court with, I think, all but 1 now off the top of my head. This just isn't a good look. I think a season would be the accurate suspension. But look, I'm not a judge. I'm not one holding the evidence in this case. I'm just giving an opinion. But if you look at it, 6 games, we'll see what the appeal brings. Wayne, your thoughts?
Well, I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan, and I can't help but compare it to the Calvin Ridley situation. A guy who admitted to betting on a game, $1,500. He didn't even play in the game, and he bet on Atlanta to win. He gets a whole season off. Those two just don't seem to equal out.
Yeah, not at all to me. Moving on to our closing thoughts of the show. The Braves start a crucial 5-game series in New York versus the Mets Thursday, including a doubleheader on Saturday. This could really make or break the NL East race. Wayne, your closing thoughts on the show this evening, buddy?
Well, I'd like to be excited about baseball this year, but the only exciting thing I could say is, we'll see what Texas can do with the new player they got from Georgia State.
We'll see what happens. Coming around under 30 days for kickoff. Remember, week 0 is the 27th. You do have a Big Ten matchup that weekend. Folks, that wraps it up. For Wayne, for TC, who's on vacation, I'm JJ. Thanks for listening to another edition of ATL Prime Sports. Get you one. We'll see you next week.